The Australian environment is an exceptional sight to behold. Its native species, renowned for their distinct physical traits, have adapted perfectly to exist in a faultless mutual relationship with the unique Australian landscape. Human interference, however, has led to the introduction of foreign species which now threaten Australia's ancient land.
Millions of years ago, the massive land that we now refer to as Australia began splitting from its neighbouring continents. While many continents remain close together, Australia became isolated and separated from the other continents by vast expanses of water. As a result, while species on other continents were evolving similar characteristics to similar nearby environments, Australia's flora and fauna adapted to the unique Australian environment.
This isolated evolution led to the distinctive native Australian species which possess traits seen nowhere else in the world today. These adaptations enable Australia's native species to coincide successfully with the Australian environment.
Kangaroos, for example, have adapted to possess soft padded feet, which reduce land degradation and vegetation destruction.
For an extended period of time, Australian species remained isolated. The land and its organisms survived in perfect harmony. With the arrival of European settlers in the late 18th century, however, Australia became home to many exotic species, all of which were far different to what the continent had previously been exposed to. Australia now relies heavily on species such as cattle, introduced by the European settlers for agriculture. The source of all beef produce, Angus cattle, was introduced to Australia in the 1820s. Nearly 2 centuries later, beef has become a major source of revenue for Australian farmers. With approximately 89,000 cattle properties located around Australia, combined possessing nearly 30 million cattle, the value of beef and live cattle exports in 2004 to 2005 was estimated to be worth approximately $470 billion. It is Australia's high economic dependency on the cattle industry that causes it to often be overlooked as a pest species within Australia. The fact of the matter is, however, that the introduced cattle species are devastating the Australian environment. This is due to the fact that cattle, having evolved in a continent completely different to Australia, possess body forms which are unsuitable for the unique terrain. Farmed using techniques developed in Europe, an environment which lies in contrast to Australia, cattle are enclosed in paddocks. This exposes the fragile Australian soil in the area to constant trampling of their hard hooves. Unlike the soft padded feet of native species, the hooves of cattle expose the soil to the elements, leaving it vulnerable to erosion. They produce further damage through soil compaction, which prevents the circulation of water and air, and consequently inhibits plant growth. This, in turn, depletes the availability of vegetation for native species and further increases soil erosion through exposure of the bare soil. Agriculture is responsible for degradation in over 61% of Australia's landscape, with 92% of this attributed to the introduced cattle and sheep species. The large quantity of introduced species now farmed in Australia is not sustainable. The environmental impacts are far too severe. In an attempt to solve this problem, many biologists and farmers are turning to the proposal of kangaroo harvesting as an alternative.
Seeing how much damage the hard feet of the sheep had done to the country, I figured that there had to be a better way.
Due to their long-term, 16 million year evolutionary history with the Australian environment, kangaroos could be harvested in large numbers whilst causing minimal damage to the Australian pasturelands. Their soft padded feet, rather than causing environmental devastation, actually promote a healthy landscape.
Another thing about kangaroos as far as the rangeland ecology is concerned is that they don't put as much foot pressure on the rangelands as the hard-hooved stock such as sheep and cattle.
It's evident that introduced agricultural species are playing havoc with Australian pastureland, devastating the unique landscape and threatening the native species which reside in it. Through reducing the agricultural industry's dependence on these foreign species and utilising our abundant levels of native animals like kangaroos, the damage currently caused to the landscape can be significantly reduced. Through this, the Australian environment can be restored so that its native flora, fauna, and abiotic components can continue to live in perfect harmony.